Hello and welcome to the Ocean Impact Podcast. I am your host, Tim Silverwood. Our guest on the podcast today is Mark Mathews, a famous professional big wave surfer who, in addition to still being an amazing surfer, is focusing a huge amount of his energy and attention on being a motivational speaker and corporate keynote. This man is highly coveted, not just because of the incredible stories and videos that he can share showing him riding some of the biggest and most intense waves in the world, but in particular in how he has overcome adversity and how he has become so resilient to injury. People from all walks of life hear what Mark has to say and they take notice. And that includes me. I was captivated during this conversation with Mark at the level of depth he has gone to in understanding his own inner workings as to how he counters fear and anxiety in what can only be described as the most stressful circumstances you will ever face, and how they are then being adapted to all these other circumstances. I thought I would take the opportunity in this conversation with Mark to really focus on what he can teach us for startups and founders and entrepreneurs and anyone who really wants to make their mark in this world but maybe gets a little bit stuck. So there's lots of links in here, lots of hints and tips for you to follow. So this is by no means a one-dimensional podcast. Mark is encouraging you to go and explore yourself deeper and do the work on yourself. I really value Mark's precious time in coming on the podcast, and I'm sure you will enjoy every single minute. Thanks as always for tuning into the podcast. Please share this one around, comment and rate. We really appreciate your support.
Can't take the ocean out of me.
Very happy to have on the Ocean Impact podcast today, Mark Mathews, big wave surfer, extraordinary ocean athlete, icon, corporate speaker. Great to see you, mate. How are you?
I'm really good, man. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah. How's 2020 treating you?
Interesting times, but the silver lining of everything that's going on is kind of everyone's getting really good and really used to connecting this way. So it's in some ways I get to connect with people that I never would have. So that part of it's good.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. We just had a bit of a conversation over LinkedIn and you were like, sure, let's jump on the podcast and have a chat. So I appreciate you being so flexible, mate.
No worries at all.
Run me through 2020 for you. Obviously, as you just said, it's a big change in circumstances and you probably spent a lot of time traveling around the world and the country. So how has 2020 been for you?
I think for me, the hugest change due to the effect of the pandemic was definitely work related for me. I mean, everything I do as far as keynote speaking goes is conferences and face-to-face events. And it was overnight, they vanished. And my entire year was set out where I was traveling to. I was kind of like 1 or 2 gigs a week, all over the world, all over the country. And then that was just gone. and that was like 90% of my finances gone as well. So it was, it was tough to adjust to at the start, because of that. But it was pretty easy to look around and find people who were struggling way worse than I was, and just taking that sort of mindset that it could be way worse, and just using it as an opportunity to get a lot more spare time at home, which is nice because I had a little baby girl who's a year old. So that was a massive silver lining to not having to travel, and now just sort of pivoting a little to where I can deliver what I deliver virtually, which is it's kind of, it could end up being really good as far as I can access more people this way. Like people, I've got jobs booked in for sort of Asia, America, and their audiences that I wouldn't get to share things with otherwise, because I wouldn't be traveling that far for a lot of different companies who can't sort of afford to fly speakers out from around the world. So that part of it's been really good. There's a silver lining, but
yeah, you're just showing us
it's a weird world.
Yeah, you're just showing us some of the kit you've invested in now to be able to sort of replicate what you obviously do normally live in the flesh and doing it virtually, which is really impressive. And look, I guess just to start the conversation, there's obviously, as a surfer and a passionate ocean advocate, there's the tendency to want to have this conversation about the ocean and all that you've achieved in it. But we're also a startup accelerator, so we are trying to find and support the entrepreneurs and the founders out there who've got great ideas to help the planet. So I suspect we're going to have a nice balance between what it is that you do with your corporate work, and we'll definitely talk about surfing. Are you cool with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think surfing's a fair bit more interesting for a lot of people, but like you said, I mean, like I think it's the entrepreneurs, the up and coming entrepreneurs who are environmentally minded can make radical difference. So I think the same sort of concepts that I talk about, dealing with fear, stress, anxiety to sort of get the best out of your performance, is a valuable one for your community, because if I can help in a tiny way to get the best out of your community, that could have an awesome effect on the ocean specifically, and maybe on the planet. So in that regards, I think that aspect of it's kind of nice.
So we'll let everyone know that tune in, because we will talk a lot about surfing soon. But I did want to start with just a bit of a spiel from you about what it is that you do in the corporate setting and why it is that you are so desirable and sought after. So give us a bit of a rundown about what it is you do and why you think it's so appealing to people across this corporate spectrum.
I think like why it's appealing is, I mean, there's a lot of variables that go into that one. I think a lot of people just love watching people wipe out on huge waves, and I've got lots of spectacular footage of that. So in some regards, that's a appealing factor. But I don't know. But as far as what I do, I've learned a lot of lessons surfing the biggest waves around the world, and creating a career out of that. And like I tell audiences, I wasn't born fearless or with some sort of brain defect that stops me from feeling fear. I was terrified of the ocean when I was a little boy. Like I was probably like one of the more scared kids out of my peer group, like to the point where my mum used to have to paddle out and rescue me all the time when I was young in the ocean, because I'd get trapped out the back, too scared to paddle to shore.
How'd that go down?
Fear of getting caught inside. Well, when you grow up in Maroubra and you're surrounded by all your older friends and surfers and the peers that you look up to in such a sort of rough, tough neighborhood, and your mum paddles out in her boogie board to rescue you, it's a pretty embarrassing experience. But yeah, so like going from that kid who's terrified of the ocean to being a big wave surfer, like I've had to overcome a lot of fear in that aspect of my life, and that for me fundamentally takes a lot of motivation. I think that's what sits below the ability to deal with fear, anxiety, and stress. So I've just gone through different, like a lot of different content, tips, techniques that I've learned over the years, like in a search for myself to be able to continually motivate myself. And I've taken them and tried them in big wave surfing to see what works for me. And we're all pretty similar. I mean, I'm not like, we're all completely different, but we're also pretty similar. So it's like the stuff that works for me seems to resonate with a lot of people around the world, from different cultures, different backgrounds, different career paths. So in that regard, it's nice to be able to share those things that have worked for me to people around the world. And I get lots of really nice messages from people saying that I've made a difference to them, that they've decided to take on a challenge that they were putting off, whether it's in their career, whether it's in their personal life. And when they see those good results and they tell them to me, it's pretty special to get that kind of feedback. And it helps me too, because I use all the techniques to overcome fear in surfing, but my fear for public speaking was way greater than my fear of drowning in the ocean, which is strange. But if you go out into society, like fear of public speaking is kind of up there in the top types of fear that people have. So I kind of used all the techniques that I did in the ocean, the motivation techniques, to get me there in the public speaking world, to build the skill set and a career as a public speaker. So in that regard, it's nice to prove to people that it's like the application of the same concepts works in different aspects of your life. So that's probably another kind of appealing thing for the people that hire me to come and speak.
What is it about public speaking that you think people find so terrifying and fearful?
I think it's just that fear of embarrassment, rejection, being shunned from the group. If you wanted to take that, why do we have that in us? I think the best theory is the evolutionary psychologists who explain. I mean, the majority of our evolution, we were in hunter-gatherer tribes, and the majority of our evolution, we were in environments that were radically more dangerous than what we live in now. Like, it's inconceivable how much more dangerous and difficult those environments were, and your survival was predicated on being part of a tribe. And basically, if you screwed up and the tribe shunned you, you're going to die, like a horrific death. So I think millions of years of that social dynamic of evolution it's just hardwired us to be so sensitive to the sort of interpersonal relationships that we have with people. And it's in some regards kind of, in a way, if you think of it as software, it's like it's a little bit outdated software to be running in today's modern world, because it's so much safer today. But on top of that, it's like our connection with people is so much greater. Like, if you think just in terms of social media, it's like all of a sudden you've got so much feedback from this massive group of people that if you're running software where one negative comment from someone is, or like a small group of people turning on you is life or death, if you're running that software in today's world, it's like, holy shit, man, that's like exponential stress and anxiety. So I think that is the sort of basis for why something like public speaking is so terrifying, and why it feels like, and it has felt like for me for years, it feels like I might die when I go up on stage, like, and it was perplexing to me for a long time until I came across those type of theories. It kind of clarifies why you have that, and not that it's like something that you can just shun easily and just go, oh, now I understand why, and now the fear's gone. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that at all. Yeah, it's good to know. It's good to know, because it gives you an understanding that you may want to update at least that portion of software that you're running to function in the modern world.
This is what I was really impressed in, just listening to some podcasts with you prior to this chat and doing some research, is that you've really gone deep into this, haven't you? And I'd love for you just to get a bit of a taste of this level of research and understanding, this journey that you've gone on, really to try and understand yourself, and then now knowing so much about what it means for you to then be able to translate it to so many other people. So give us a bit of a timeline of what that was like, to that confusion and desire to overcome it in yourself, to then what those learning stages were, to then feel confident that you had something to share with others.
Yeah, I think for me, it was born out of the fact that I was never the most talented surfer. Like, I was kind of like a state level surfer. I never even made it to the national titles. I was never one of the kids who was like, had huge sponsorship straight away. And I really wanted the career out of surfing, but it meant that I had to do it in a different way. And I had to try and pick up every skill under the sun to be valuable to a company that was going to sponsor me. And that led me down the track of big wave surfing, as far as that wasn't a very competitive field. Like, there's only a small amount of people that want to go out and surf those waves consistently over a long period of time and make a career from doing that. So to me, it was like, okay, here's like that field where I could possibly fit in and create a career out of. And then as I managed to push myself into surfing big waves, I fell in love with it. Like, the feeling of it is just so extraordinary. And I can take any surfer, any top level surfer that's competes on the world tour, that has won world titles, and when they come and experience some of those big waves, they're just like, it blows their mind. Like, the feeling is so addictive. But to do it consistently, like the amount of fear and stress you got to deal with to do it consistently over a decade, that's really hard to do. And that's why I was constantly trying to look for ways to, one, manage the stress and anxiety, but then on the other hand, build the motivation that I needed to keep doing it. So it's like, you need so much motivation to do it, but then you need tools to minimize stress and anxiety to create that balance where you can be successful over a sort of longer period of time. And so I was constantly figuring out what motivated me and what is sustainable motivation. And it kind of like at different periods of life, different things motivate you more and less. And you start to figure that certain motivations, while really strong, are really taxing as well. So if you look at all external types of motivation, whether it's financial rewards or accolades from peers, or just those type of things like that are external from what you're doing, if those external motivators don't align with what you intrinsically value, then they will burn you out really quickly. So and then I guess then that sort of starting point that I learned is like, you really have to get to know yourself. And that's tough to do, because you got to be honest with yourself about what is actually really important to you. And when you do figure that out, if you can match that with a career that you're doing or with what you want to do, then all of a sudden the motivation grows. And then things that looked before more like scary, they're to you, they're more exciting, because you know what's important to you. And if something lies on the other side of that fear, then you're just much more likely to choose yourself to take that fear on, because you know what's important. That thing on the other side of fear is important to you and your life. Then you're going to take it on, rather than the reverse version. It's like, I really want the money that's on the other side of doing something scary. That can get you there for short periods of time and to certain degrees of fear that you're taking on. But I've found over time that it doesn't seem as sustainable. But when it all aligns, it's like the things that are valuable to you, also a byproduct is financial reward, then all of a sudden, like, that all matches up.
So how's your motivation now versus when you were, say, a late teen? How has that changed over time?
Late teen, I was just really focused on impressing people, like, and that's a natural thing at that age, and you're hyper motivated because you're full of testosterone, like on a sort of hormonal and chemical level, like your energy level to impress people is huge, and that was kind of the main reason that pushed me down the path of surfing big waves. Like, to want to be a famous surfer, you want to impress people, basically.
You have to.
Yeah. But then it got to the point where I was like, that initially took me there, but then I fall in love with, one, the experience of surfing the big waves is phenomenal, right? Like that present moment of standing on a huge wave, being terrified, and then making out the other side. Like, it's a really addictive feeling. But that's like, if I added all the big waves up that I've ridden in my life, that might be an hour or two worth of my entire life. So it's like, you can't just do it for that. So then it's like, well, what else under there is like, you want to impress people. Like, so you want people to respect you, think that you're courageous, think that you'll take things on, like they're natural sort of motivators. Then you want financial reward from that. And then that started to come as I got sponsors. And then what the finance does for your life is also important, because it might give you the freedom to do other good things. It might give you time. It might give you the ability to support family members. Like, all these different things start to play in it. But I think the most valuable aspect that I learned of motivation is just that I like the challenge of testing skills that I acquire in those tough environments, and just seeing progression of the skills that you're generating. To me, that's like, I think that's been the most sustainable form of motivation that I've had throughout my life in regards to surfing. It's like, these waves look unsurfable, like not many people can surf them. I can go out and do all this preparation, all this training, develop everything I can, every tool I can, psychologically, physically, all this stuff, and then go out there and put it to a test and see if I can do it. And to me, I think that has actually been the more sustainable version of motivation. It's just heightened by all the benefits from it as a career, I think.
And that's obviously a really good segue to talk about that passion and desire for that feeling and that long-term motivation. But then you throw into the mix injuries that then set you away from that so far. You've just gone right back to the almost beginning, and you've got to then incrementally build your way back. Is that the main motivation? Is there a bit of that, this sort of like, I have to get back because this is my identity, this is who I am, it's my career? Like, what on earth drives you back from the brink on some of these major injuries you've had?
I think it's all those things. Definitely that, like the part where it is part of your identity, and the loss of it is tough to deal with. So you do want that back. That's a huge motivator. It's definitely not the best one to sort of chase. Like, I think that when your identity shifts into those intrinsic things, like I value like the progression of developing a skill set and then putting it to the test and making it work, then it doesn't matter whether it's surfing or anything else. It's like I can still get the positive emotion and the excitement out of whatever it is I'm doing, you know. And I learned that a lot when I was injured. It's like, if all I'm focusing on is surfing and the need to get back to surfing, then that period of not being able to surf, which has for some injuries been over a year, 2 years, is like, it's too tough to deal with if my whole identity is wrapped in. So it's like, but if I can shift attention to a new skill, pick up a new skill, go out and test it in an environment, I can still get all that positive emotion while I'm injured, you know. Like, so it's, for me, it was more than, it was the adjustment of your goals and what you're chasing while you're injured that makes it manageable, you know, throughout the injuries. Because like right now, after a really severe injury, my career is kind of, it came to an end at an abrupt halt, you know. Like, so I was told I'd never surf again after dislocating my knee, and I've got permanent nerve damage, so my foot doesn't work, like all these different things. So it's like, your career's gone as a professional big wave surfer, identity, all of that stuff. I think if I hadn't learned so much about motivation and sort of the basic psychological needs that you need to function, I think that would have crushed me. I don't think I would have been able to deal with the transition. But I was able to just use those tools as just like to reframe what life looks like for me now with the injury, you know. And as long as you can find progression in skill sets, and you can like, so it's like find progression, like it's like pick what you want out of life, right? So it's like what is meaningful for you? What do you want life to look like in 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And like, that takes time, like months, to sort of develop what's really important to you. Get to know yourself, what's possible too, like what are you capable of? And then be like, okay, that's what I'm chasing. And then restructure life so that you're moving towards that goal. I think that's like the basis of psychological well-being. If you have that implemented, then the identity pieces and the money and all those different things are just a secondary part of what make you happy, I think. So I was just able to shift from what I was doing surfing to speaking, like, and speaking's harder for me than surfing. So it's like, and it's so nerve-wracking. So it's got all the components of surfing, but it's almost better because like surfing I wasn't doing that much good in the world. It's like you're just going out and surfing big waves and getting paid to do it. It's awesome. And I was doing good in far as I could take care of my family, which is unbelievably motivating. Like originally, if you know, I think for people in our culture and society that we're in, especially here in Australia, where you're doing so well, right? Like you're not on the borderline of poverty and survival. It's like the understanding of how valuable it is to provide for your family gets shunned down a little bit, you know, like for other people in the world, man, if you're just bringing food home for your kids, that's like the greatest existence you could possibly live. You would get so much joy out of doing that. But whereas here in Australia, it's not as heightened because we live such comfortable lives. So in that regard, you kind of got to shift what you're doing to satisfy the other aspects of your needs, which is like that progression of skills, development, movement towards things, and then going from your personal family and how can you help community, you know, like what can you do for the community. And as far as my speaking goes, like it's way more satisfying for me in regards that I actually make a difference in people's life compared to surfing, you know, which is really nice. And it's like it's something that I didn't originally think would be that prevalent, you know, like I kind of, at the start it was like get up, tell surf stories, entertain people, and just tell them what worked for me, and that was good enough. But when you start getting feedback that it's like you're really helping people, it's like, whoa, that feels really good. So like all of that has been able to shift, you know, like, and deal with the injuries, setbacks throughout life. You know, that was a long-winded answer to, I can't remember what your question was about.
It's all good, mate. When you get on a roll, we all sit back and listen. So going back to this sort of notion of why it's clear that you're so coveted to put up on a podium or get in front of a camera and share your insights and stories. And, you know, for the startup community and people out there who, you know, perhaps are still working out the medium to long-term values alignment, but they're in a point in their life where they've got the fire in the belly. They've got, an attitude that's right. They want to try and do something beneficial for the planet or for people. They're our change makers in waiting. It really is these lessons around, you know, resilience and overcoming adversity and perseverance, which for me are clearly why people love listening to you so much. So let's talk a little bit more about those injuries, because nothing to me indicates the resilience and perseverance of Mark Mathews than overcoming the injuries that you have. So can you give us a little bit of a rundown of that timeline of the type of injuries you've had and over the last, you know, decade, and how you overcome them and where you're at now?
Yeah, I've had a few, like some physically like sort of really serious, but then didn't have that big an effect on what I was doing. And then others that were not physically as serious, but the mental effect and the adjustments that I made in life because of them were way more serious, in that it changed the way I was doing what I was doing. I think the important ones I think to talk about is I had a really bad one down in Shipsterns. Not physically that bad in the end, but I was knocked unconscious underwater. And when I came up and was rescued, I thought I'd broken my neck because the kind of whiplash that I suffered was so bad that I was getting pins and needles down my arms and down my back. And so from the time that I was getting rescued from Shipsterns, taken to hospital, and then eventually getting x-rays, it was kind of like this 6 to 8 hour period where I thought I'd broken my neck. I knew it wasn't so bad that I couldn't walk because I could move my hands, I could move my feet, but I just thought, man, this is the end of my surfing career. I thought I'd done one of those neck injuries where it's like you can't then go out and take impact ever again. And in my head, that was the first time I was really like that vulnerability I had in the water. Like, because up until that point, I was doing crazy shit for a lot of years. And this happened when in 2000, and I would have been like 6 or late 20s, when I was sort of late 20s. And that was the first time I was like, hold on a minute, I could die doing what I'm doing, or, you know, like something really bad could happen. So then it was like that shook me enough to go, have a look at the way you're doing what you're doing and how you can do it better. And I attributed in the end that injury to being burnt out. So I was so focused on being a successful surfer, and that meant going out and getting photos and footage and publicity that would then turn into sponsorship dollars. Like that was the sort of cycle. And no matter what, if a swell came up anywhere around the world nonstop, I was just traveling around the world surfing big swell after big swell after big swell after big swell, with the sole focus of getting publicity and building bigger and bigger sponsors. Like none of it to me at that point, for over like a 3-4 year period, was a focus on enjoying surfing the waves, like, which kind of just burnt me out. Like it was all I was focused was completely in external results and what other people were thinking about my performance, what my sponsors were thinking, what would make for good photos, what would, like, but it may have been really successful surfing. Like, so I'm not saying that that's wrong, but it just wore me down to the fact that I was physically became exhausted. Like I was kind of on the verge of chronic fatigue. I'd get sick all the time, just niggling injuries over time. But I kind of just kept pushing until that happened down in Tasmania. And so after that, it was like I had to learn to do what I was doing, try and get the same results, but don't let it tax me so much physically. And a big part of that was not only adjusting the motivation piece behind what I was doing, so to be less externally focused. Like you put everything in place so that the content comes out of the surf session. But when I'm out in the water, it's about enjoying the surf session, like, and treating it like no one's watching and just doing what I do, like for the enjoyment, and that made a huge difference. Learning to manage the head noise in the lead up to big swells made a big difference. So it's like you get a big swell forecast, after checking, I could check the swell forecast this morning and you see a huge swell coming, and in a week's time you're going to be surfing massive waves somewhere. So for 7 days, it's like someone switches on a TV at the back of your head, and in the back of my head, the TV just plays every single way I might die in 7 days' time in this surf session. And it's like constant loop of thoughts of all the worst case scenarios that could play out, and for a long time I was like, I'd get caught up in those thoughts, and my attention would shift to them, and I'd just constantly be thinking about it. And then by the time I'd turn up to surf, after a week of that, my body felt like I'd been through 1,000 wipeouts before I'd even put a foot in the water. And that was all just due to replaying wipeouts over and over again in my head. So learning tools to sort of disconnect from the negative thought patterns, because like the negative thoughts are trying to, one, either tell you don't do what you're about to do, right? Which is pretty good advice for some waves that I was going to surf. But I was like, I'm going to surf them anyway. Like that's what I'm going to do no matter what that TV in my head is playing. So it's like, well, once you make that choice, it's like, okay, so now the thoughts, you can think of the thoughts, they're telling you, you need to prepare to avoid all these things happening. So it's like, okay, that's a better way of looking at it. These are all the things that might go wrong because I'm watching them in my head over and over again. What do I need to do to prepare to avoid that? Or if they do happen, what's my contingency plan after? And so doing that and doing that real specific preparation for all those things, that would like lessen the head noise. So proper preparation. But then like it doesn't completely get rid of it. It's still there, and you can only do so much preparation. So once the preparation is done, the contingency plans are put into place for when things go wrong, then it's about the ability to just not let those thoughts affect you physically. And that's just by using techniques that disconnect you from thinking about them long enough for it to create a physical response. So if you have a thought and you dwell on it for just long enough, then you have an emotional response, and that plays out in your physical body. Like you get tension, like tense, people get stress, you get tight neck muscles, all these different sort of physical ailments from constantly thinking about that. So, but if you can just use a few different techniques that I had, one was questioning your thoughts. It's a technique called the work. It's developed by an author called Byron Katie, and I found it really useful for a long period of time. It's kind of like you got to sit there and see that you're dwelling on a thought. Like I can see, okay, I'm playing out for dying and then up and coming swell. And then there's a series of questions to make you detach from the thought. And it's like, so first, what is the thought? And you write it down. Like these techniques, you got to write them down, because if you stay within your head trying to justify and think about things, like your brain justifies itself at the speed of light. So you can't compete with that. So you got to actually write it down, you know? So it's like, what is the thought? And then you write down, it's okay, I'm going to drown in this next big swell. How does the thought make you feel? Okay, so then think about the actual physical feeling that I'm having when I'm thinking about drowning. Like, oh, and you can feel tightness. Oh, it's like feel nervous, apprehension, anxious, you know, like all these different things I'm feeling. And then the next question is, who would you be without that thought? So it's like, once you ask yourself that question, it's like, okay, imagine I don't have this thought for a moment. What do I feel like? And then it's like, all the stress lifts off you, and you're just like, holy
Feeling
shit.
it.
Yeah, you're like, holy shit, I feel good. You know, like, and it's just like highlights. It's like, that's what the thought's doing to you. And in the blink of an eye, like, and if you lift all that mental stress, like, you're going to go into the dangerous event in better shape, you know, because if I could disconnect from those thoughts, you know, consistently throughout the day, and they weren't wearing me down, then when I do turn up to surf big waves, because I've decided I'm going to do it anyway, then when I do turn up, I'm in the best shape to deal with it. But if I constantly played the thoughts over in my head, then I'm going to turn up physically exhausted. You know?
And therefore vulnerable.
Yeah.
So
So
that
it's
research, that research by, you said, is it Byron Katie? I mean, is that been adapted for people dealing with fear in any setting? Is it designed for people that are going into, you know, sport and adrenaline environments, or was it just for a general?
No, it's for general. Yeah, and she uses it. It's really good in like, I think she's a relationship counselor is her background, and it's really good in counseling relationships, because there's a couple more questions then that you add on that explore why you think the way you do, and like her version of it is more like what you're thinking about your partner, you know. And then she's got all these questions that, and basically when you flush it out, it's like the negative thoughts that you're thinking about your partner are most likely coming from things that you don't like about yourself, you know, like, and changing what you don't like about yourself is much easier, much more rewarding than trying to change someone else, you know. So yeah, it's that's where I think the book that I read in was called Loving What Is, was the name of the book. But she's got an online platform that's really good called The Work, and you can write the answers in the platform, you know, and it asks you the questions. Really good technique. But here's the kicker: it doesn't work whatsoever if you don't do the preparation. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't compete without doing the preparation. That's the part that I learned, because it's like I went down rabbit holes with all the cognitive technique, which that is like you're using that part of your brain to like sort of reframe the way you're seeing the world. But you can only the reframing will only last if you actually have done the preparation to build the skill set to deal with the scary environment. Because I could take you know, like a beginner surfer to go down to surf Shipstones Bluff. They could do every cognitive reframing technique under the sun, meditation, like Byron Katie's The Work, cognitive behavioral therapy, like any technique you want. They're going to be shitting themselves the whole week before they go down there, because they just don't have the skill set to deal with it. So it's like the preparation, the skill set's the most important. and then techniques like Byron Katie's one, and all the other awesome ones, they're add-ons to the skill set. So it's and I mean, for your audience that are doing startups, I mean, it's like, that's terrifying, you know, like in so many regards. Like, failure is terrifying. And when you start up, it's like you're going to put the security of a job that you know you can have for life and do in this thing, you know, like you're pushing that security aside to take on something that you has way higher element of failure in it, like way more likelihood of failing. So all of a sudden you're just you're deciding to take on so much more stress and anxiety. So then it's like, know why you're doing it, like really get to know yourself, why, and the benefits of why you're going to take on something like that. Know your skill set, you know, like, and are you clever enough? Are you good? Like, you can do testing under the sun to understand whether it's likely that what you're doing is beneficial, you know, and then build the experience, develop the skills, use the techniques, and that's kind of puts you in the best stead to manage all that stress that you're gonna face, you know.
I'm interested, like, a lot of this conversation is around an experience, right? You know, you see that swell chart, you know, in a week, and that's when, you know, you need to then start that really dedicated preparation. And I'm thinking, in a work environment, a corporate environment, like, sure, there might be an event coming up or a promotion or an opportunity that they didn't be doing it. But then I'm thinking that a lot of those corporate environments you're going into and the people that you're talking to, are they not in a hyper stressed and tested environment kind of every day of the week? Like, I'm imagining those full on elite level corporate roles. So what is the difference between living constantly in this state versus it being sort of periodical? Like, you might go for half a dozen big wave trips a year when you're in your prime. So how do the two kind of correspond in that regard?
Yeah, I think like, when I say you do the preparation in the week lead up, that's just the specific preparation for that particular trip. It's like, where's the nearest hospital? Like, can I get a helicopter to that location to get out if something goes bad? Who's my safety team there? How many jet skis do I have? Where are they positioned? When I black out underwater, where are they going to take me to resuscitate me? Like, that's the specifics. But the preparation to surf big waves is done your entire life. It's like, it's all the training, it's the surfing, it's the skill set. And in that way, that's what corporate people are doing. You know, like, you're building your skill sets to be valuable to the company that you work for. And the big wave swells, thanks to amazing forecasting technology, ends up being like anywhere from 10 to 25 a year now. Originally, it started out, it was only about 4 or 5, which was way more manageable. Then all of a sudden, it's like way more. So it's like every month something big coming up. And the example is like, it might be the big sales pitches that you have, like big opportunities that are coming for your company, big, you know, like all these different little pieces of the puzzle is where it really relates. I think the part that's way more heightened for corporate people is the interpersonal conflict that surrounds that type of work environment. That's in a way unavoidable. Like, it's because you create this environment. It's like the company's success is the paramount rule of law, because if that, like, within the game that you're playing, because if that doesn't happen, none of you have a job, you know. So that's put at top. So what are all the things that the company needs to be, you know, successful? And then it's like, so it's all these different positions functioning as they do. And then it's like, you've got all this talent, but the talent might want these different positions, that there's only one, you know, for every 1,000 people that are working there, or whatever the odds are. So there's natural competition within that environment, which is a good thing as well. But then you have that heightened interpersonal conflict, you know, which is, fuck, man, that must be really tough to deal with, like dealing with different personality traits and all that sort of stuff. But the same fundamental things apply. It's like, get to know yourself really well. Like I got like a series of things that I did that was so valuable for me to learn about myself, which basically gives you all the tools, like forges the everything you need to deal with stress. And it's like the best ones I did was like IQ tests. You can find that online. Like understand your IQ and what aspects of IQ that you can develop and get stronger at. Like not all of them you can, but certain ones you can, like language comprehension, all those pieces of IQ. So know how smart you are, for one thing. It's valuable. The other ones were like personality trait profiling. There's a website you can do that on called understandmyself.com. It gives a really good big 5 personality traits. So then you understand like the way you view the world, and it gives you an understanding of how other people view the world. And they're all genetically predetermined traits that you have, and they stay stable across time. So it's like you can navigate life based on the knowledge that you have of those traits. The other ones were, there's a really good one, self-authoring suite. That's like a series of questions that, like a writing task that pulls out of you what's valuable to you. And if you do that, and then that will force you to forge a plan for your life and what's important and what's not important. So it's kind of like when you do all of those, and then probably the final one is kind of like more like your core values as a human being, like trying to figure out what they are. A couple questions that can help you do that. It's like who's the people that you know personally that you admire, like not necessarily famous people, because you don't know the intricate details of their life. You know, you can do it with famous people and you might see attributes that you admire, but then admire that one attribute, you know, like not necessarily the life. But so it's like, who do you admire and who do you detest? And when you do that and write down those people, write down the things about them, and then you can find characteristic traits that you truly value, whether that's like loyalty, you know, trust, hard work, being clever, whatever they might be, you know. And then you know that. So once the more fully formed you are and have knowledge about yourself, then going into that tough work corporate environment that's full of that interpersonal conflict, you just have the tools to navigate it, and you know what you'll put up with, what you won't put up with. So I think those same things apply across the board, whether it's you're a professional athlete doing something as silly as chasing big waves, or whether you're in a corporate environment working, or whether you're a startup entrepreneur. I think they're just the subset of what make people be able to deal with the stresses of life, basically.
When did you know you had such leadership qualities? Is there a time in your life when you just started to realize, shit, I've actually got a lot of life experience and I've got an ability to communicate it, having done the work on myself? Like, when did it really start to come out?
I kind of still don't think it now. Like, I just share what I like hearing, basically. It's a hard one because everyone always has that imposter syndrome. Like, you're never good enough to fill that role, and I fight against it. I just think I have specific, like, I have knowledge that's worked for me in these certain environments and these certain aspects of my life. But it's like, you learn quick smart that you don't know everything. Like, I just had a baby, and it's like, now all of a sudden I have a much greater appreciation and understanding for people who have kids. And then if you've got kids and you're working and you do it, like, you know, like I'm constantly learning, but I just like to share the things that I've learned and that have worked for me. And for sure, they're not for everyone, but and people in different stages of their life where they don't need to hear what I'm saying. Like, they're leagues ahead of me in what they're doing in life. You know, it's but then some people do. So it's like I try and, that's the thing in my head, that to try and make it easier for me to get up on stage and talk to people about this stuff. It's like, okay, there's definitely people in this room that are not going to give a shit about what I'm saying, right? For sure. And some of them are going to be sitting there and they're going to be spewing that they even have to sit there and listen to me, right? But if that's going to be my focus, then I'm never going to get up and do it. You know, I just focus that if I get 1, 2, 3, 10%, 20% of people in that room, and even if I only make a 1% difference, then that's better than nothing, you know? So I try and just focus on that. But to your question, it's like, I like, as far as, I think everyone is a leader, you know, like, because you all have shared knowledge. It's more like leaders are more like, you all have your own experience. I think leaders become good leaders when they develop a toolkit to be able to communicate what they know. Do you know what I mean? Because then you can lead. Like, because if you live for a certain amount of time on the planet, you have experience, you know, and if you're constantly trying to better yourself, do all the right things, then you have the experience, but it's like the toolkit to be able to pass on what you've learned. And that's what I'm trying to learn, you know. It's not easy, but that's what I'm trying to learn, is that toolkit to just tell people about what works for me.
Yeah, look, I'm gonna push you on the fact, like, you're, screw the imposter syndrome. Like, you are a massive leader, and I just think about those 1%, 10%, 20% of all those people that you've interacted with over the years and the lasting impact that you've had. And a huge thing for us as Ocean Impact Organisation, as we support as many entrepreneurs and founders and accelerate as many startups as possible, is mentorship. It is the ability to line people up with people who've got that experience, who've got that little gap that the other person has, to just help them grow into their best version of themselves. Do you have any profound mentors that you've had throughout your life, or is there any experiences where you've mentored others that stand out to talk about mentorship?
Oh, for sure. I try and find them in all the different, like, roles or silos of my life, like different people for different one. Like, when I look in the speaking world, I try and find the best speakers or facilitators or coaches, and if it's accessible to me, I'll try and work with them. Like, I pay, when I first started speaking, because I knew how valuable that was from surfing as well, and just in everything I do, just learning from people who are doing it the best. I spent almost my life savings at that point to work with the best people to develop my skill set as a speaker. Like, it's that important to find those people. But the beautiful thing about the internet is, like, you can access, like, these phenomenal role models, you know, and information, so much information, you can't believe it, on every topic under the sun, you know. So it's more, I think, being able to filter out negative influences, like and that's all, again, about learning about yourself, setting, you know, that goal structure, what you want to achieve, because then that will highlight what are the negative versions of a role model that you just don't want to listen to, and being able to filter, like, all the crazy amounts of information into what you really need for your journey in life. Because you just got to be able to get rid of all the other noise, and as soon as you get rid of all the other noise, like, your learning ability goes through the roof, and it's just valuable then, because you're learning stuff that's taking you on that path. But if you don't know what the thing is that you're chasing, then you can't filter it out, you know. You have no idea. So role models, like, my mum has always had this constant motivation for learning things, and she, like, and it's not like learning to be the best at something. She just loves, like, picking up a hobby, doing it and crafting, and seeing the value of a skill getting better, you know, like, And I think that's really sunk into me, like, as far as it's so valuable to have those little things where you can just pick up skills, develop a skill, and get the enjoyment from just developing skills, you know. And whether it's like playing music or a writing skill or whatever it is, you know. I think that, like, as far as that's had one of the biggest influences on me. My dad, his sort of moral compass and character, he's a surgeon, and I can remember the period in my life where, for whatever reasons, we were kind of struggling financially, and he was offered like jobs doing plastic surgery, like, and he would have made untold monies taking his skill set and moving into the plastic surgery field, like. But he declined it because he knew that he wouldn't be happy down the line doing that, and it was what he did to help people save their lives and stuff was more valuable to him. So it was like that character trait, you know, from him, the one from my mum, like, and then the insights into public speaking from this one person. Like, I think if you just have like that, you have a whole list of people and their attributes that you admire, you know, that then can help govern your decision making and your actions, you know.
A couple
But
more questions.
you'll never find those people unless you do the work, you know, that introspective work on who you are now and who you want to be in the future. You know, that's basic psychology. That's what a clinical psychologist will sit you down and go, you know, what's going on in your life? Tell me about yourself. What happened in the past? But the most importantly, they'll go, okay, so where do you want to go? What do you want to do? You know, like, and that's the most fundamental questions that can help you. So the version to do it, if you don't have access to a good psychologist, is do it for yourself. You know, ask the questions of yourself.
I think that's going to be a really standout lesson from today's podcast, and really appreciate all those links and mentions that you made before.
Yeah, if we can write them down for people. I listen to a lot of podcasts and I'm like, I want to know specifically what I can go and do next.
Yeah,
There's another one. There's a coursera.com has courses on everything from every big university under the sun. And you can do like these overview courses that are phenomenal. And I would say, in what we're talking about in the motivation space, there's one, and it would only take you like 8-10 hours to do. It's self-determination theory. It's a really good one in encompassing good pieces of psychology, packaging it well and understanding what really truly motivates you. I'd have a look at that one if people want to get on a good pathway. You know, I wish I learned that stuff when I was like, early 20s might have been too young, but like 25 or so, it's real valuable.
We're going to wrap things up soon, mate. But I did just, when you were talking about interpersonal conflict, my mind was drifting off to, you know, the brotherhood of surfing, and particularly big wave surfing. And that's been sort of well communicated, and lots of stories emerging around that incredible brotherhood, despite the fact that you're so driven to get the best wave of the day and to get the best shot and the most eyeballs on your exploits. So brotherhood, I'd like to talk about that. But I'd also guess one sort of question which I'm really keen to ask is, how different would your life have been if you hadn't have moved to Maroubra when you were a teenager?
Man, I don't like radically different, of course. I think that's what got me into big wave surfing more than anything else. I mean, my personality traits and the things that govern a lot of my decision making I would have had regardless, but it was just like the exposure to the sport of big wave surfing, the exposure to what's possible in big wave surfing, because I was growing up with like Kobe Abernon, for example, and then a whole series of other surfers from Maroubra that it's like, it was just part of their mandate to prove your courage in the surf, you know, and that's what I grew up with. And that was so valuable to me. It's like, yeah, you can put your courage to the test and your hard work to the test in the water, you know, like that. And that's such a positive sort of outlet for when you're a young kid to do that. It spilled over on into like negative shit, like and fighting and violence and all of that, and that's unfortunate, route that sort of positive mentality took. But yeah, I would never gotten into the sport of big wave surfing, I don't think.
Is that similar in other?
It's hard to know for sure, but like it was like doing an apprenticeship with the best in the business at such a young age was like, that's you wanted to do a business one. It's like growing up next door to, I don't know, whoever the most successful business person in your field is, it's pretty valuable.
Is that similar in other big wave cultures around the world, that there's that sort of exertion of courage as a result of a peer group? Is that indicative from what you've seen of other big wave communities around the world?
Yeah, definitely. I think like people pretend it's not, and that it's all just about riding the waves and the feeling of riding the waves. Well, that's like a huge part of it too. I think any sort of, I mean, you could go across any sort of really dangerous feat that's not hunting and bringing food back for your family. It's kind of like, it's on one hand proving your courage to the group because people are hearing about it or watching it or whatever, but there's also the intrinsic value if you're putting your skills to the test in the, like it's too complex to say that it's just about that external viewpoint of wanting to impress people. Like, it's way too complex. There's so many different factors that go into it, but I guarantee you that's a part of it. Like people like to pretend that they don't do things for the part that's like they get that ego enjoyment out, but they're fooling themselves, man. That stuff's so like subconscious. That stuff's built into the way your nervous system functions. Like, you're constantly viewing the world through lenses of where you're positioned in human competence hierarchies. Like that's the way you see the world, and your nervous system and the way it produces positive neurochemicals that offset emotion, like dopamine, serotonin, like those nervous systems are attuned to where you fit within a group of humans on a competence scale, like, so to pretend that you like don't care about what people think of you, you're full of shit. Like it's good to manage, definitely, but yeah, you're full of shit. You're most likely care so much of what people think of you that you want them to think that you don't care what they think, because that's then your persona, like, and you're on the hierarchy of people that don't care what other people think. Like it's to try and fool yourself is you're banging your head against the wall. It's more about like using it, like use the motivation that's there about that. It shouldn't be a single motivation, but it's like, if that's a course of motivation to prove your courage, it's like, okay, that's good. I can put my skill set to the test here. One positive is that I get feedback from my peer group, which is great. But then it's also, how can I take what I'm doing there and use it for the benefit of the group, or the benefit of society, or the benefit of my family, or the benefit, like that. Then you're starting to like forge like the pieces of motivation and human psychology for the better of the group. And I think that's what and maybe that naturally happens as you get older, but I think that's what I've been fortunate enough to be able to do with speaking, because it's like, to me, this is more, what's it called? Like, I feel a lot better about doing what I'm doing now than I did when I was getting paid good money to be a professional big wave surfer. Like intrinsically, I feel a lot better. And I probably like now put more hours into this than I did surfing, like, because you feel better about it, but who knows? I might not feel that way if I didn't have all the experiences of surfing big waves. It's way too complex, I think. But
back to the brotherhood, and I think it touches on that, right? Because the ego, and I'd imagine that the ego and the hierarchy would lead to that situation where there's people out there amongst the brotherhood that maybe you don't like, or maybe you don't get along with, or maybe there's a little aberration in your relationship. But when you're out there in those environments, suddenly the pack, I'm assuming, just galvanizes around that level of responsibility that you all share for the pack. You want to tell us a little bit about what's really special about that brotherhood of big wave surfing?
Yeah, I think like it's like you'd have to go and it's not my specialty, but you go into like the psychology behind tribalism, and why it's so valuable, why it's so motivating, and then it's kind of like, as long as it's steered in the right direction, it can be valuable. But it's like, it has to be like, and not to get too abstract, but it has to be like, the individual has to be the focus point within the tribes, and the understanding that you're all different, but you're all working towards a sort of common movement or common good. But if the individual and the sanctity of individuals isn't like the foremost ideal, then tribalism goes real pear-shaped real fast. But in surfing, it's like, I think you naturally come together and on shared experience. Like that's if there's three main, needs, psychological needs, is like autonomy, relatedness, and competence. And relatedness is like that huge piece that you're having shared experience with your community doing something, and I think in surfing, we just all have that. Like, you have this crazy love for this lifestyle and sport that you do, and it just brings people together. Sure, there's competition in the water for the waves. Like, fuck, that's human nature. Like, that's what happens. It's just the way it is. But deep down in yourself, like, and I can even look back at my career, I reckon the more memorable moments in my career now, like once I'm further removed from it, when I've taken someone who was terrified about going to surf a huge wave, and I coach them into surfing a big wave, and then they get the biggest wave of their life. Like, they're actually more memorable moments to me than the waves I rode myself. And like that's a natural part of like human psychology as well. So it's like, it's nice to know that, like, you compete to get your waves, but know that you probably will feel pretty damn good if you like maybe give up one wave for someone, or you get someone, the best wave that they've caught that day is a pretty good way to sort of manage that friction in the water. I mean, I'm living at Snapper and surfing Rainbow Bay and Snapper. It's like, you've never seen more crowd, but it's fascinating that there isn't more friction than there is. And I think that's a testament to, you have a shared experience, shared love for the ocean. Like, there's so many commonalities between everyone that's out there,
Good point. Hey, I just want one more question and then we'll wrap it up. I mean, we are an environmental organisation out to help planet ocean. And as much as the subject today was not going to be about that, it was about you and all that you've got to offer, all your wisdom. But do you have any attitudes to share about the ocean, any concerns, or about planetary issues more broadly?
I feel like just because it's so far removed from what I sort of look into and study, I usually like to leave it up to the experts. I mean, I feel really good about minimizing my footprint as much as I can. My good mate Dan Ross just started an awesome company, One for Life, I think it's called, so glass bottles to minimize plastic waste in the ocean. I did hear an awesome stat today, which is a silver lining of the what we're going through, which was like this, I think it's 48% less plastic water bottle use since the lockdowns.
Because people aren't mobile, maybe, and not going out and
people aren't
grabbing it
mobile and
conveniently.
grabbing it from the shop. Like, they're at home, so they're just drinking water out of a tap.
Been offset by plastic face masks and everything else.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's the radical thing. I did hear once, I can't remember the talk, but it was a while ago, but it was showing the value of doing whatever you can do to get people out of poverty and get countries and economies out of poverty, and then their relationship with the environment becomes a lot more important And the guy's whole talk was the importance of using that as a tact to help the environment for a multitude of levels, man. The details that they went into and why it's valuable, even to the point of like, it's like as wealthier nations have less kids, like, so it's like all of a sudden the population demand on the earth is lower, like just from making people wealthier, which was I never even thought of it like that. Like, it's crazy. But yeah, that was really interesting to me. And then I think like he had a really balanced, or this might have been someone else, but there was a balanced view of like, while a lot of negative environmental impact is greed and stuff like that, like corporate greed, and even us as individuals wanting to live really comfortably, like he was explaining that the relationship with nature and the environment is actually more like what we do to the environment is more predicated over a long period of time on that nature in itself has been so brutal to survive within, and the premise is that you're trying to create comfort and security by altering the environment across time. So it's not like, while the greed and all that is bad, but it has to be an understanding. I think that goes to then helping people economically, is like, once you get people that level of comfort and security, then they start to view nature differently. Whereas it's like, if you went back 500 years or further, it's like you were watching like 8 of your 10 children die in your hands due to some, nature caused death, like an infection or like an animal killing your kid, or like, so the viewpoint of like your relationship with nature was totally different. But as you become more secure due to awesome technological advancements, due to wealth, better functioning societies, then you can get a better perspective on what nature gives you, like. And I just thought, man, that was a cool way to, like, it was a different way to hear our interaction with the environment compared, like, because the standard one is greed is what's killing the world, like, where it's more, I think now that as we've become further technologically advanced, further developed, and you're ridding the world of hunger and starvation and all these different types of things, then I think humans will do a radical 180 on the way they treat the planet. I think because the psychology will change, and you can see it happening with people like you and what you do and all your community, like that's the shift, and it's only in the last couple generations where we actually realize how much damage we're doing, because science has gotten good enough that you're like, hold on a minute, you actually are fucking up the world, like, whereas people just thought oceans were so big that no human, whatever humans do, there's no way you could affect an organism that big, whereas you're only just realizing it now. So while we're pretty slow moving in fixing it, I'm pretty optimistic that humans can fix it,
I'm going to wrap it up and bring it full circle to your beautiful young daughter, Matilda. And I'm not sure whether it was the resource you were referring to or not, but Paul Hawken, who did a big body of research called Drawdown, and it was all these techniques and tools that humans can utilize to start to not just stop carbon pollution, but draw it down. And the single most valuable thing we could do is to empower young women. And empower and educate women would be the most powerful thing. So exactly to your point there about drawing people out of poverty, if we shift the focus and engage and empower women, the world will be transformed in a couple of generations' time.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear the details of how that plays out, because I'm sure one of them would be like the one I was listening to. It's like, women have only just joined the workforce, like all of a sudden they got careers and stuff like that. So there's not even time to have more children, and that was the other part that I was amazed at, because I always thought like there's going to be way too many people on the planet for the planet to sustain that many people. But then there's a lot of scientists that actually believe that because we're bringing women into the workforce and lessening poverty, that the population is actually going to start going backwards eventually, because you only have like 2 people only have 1 kid, or on average 1.5 kids, and then all of a sudden it's like they start to get concerned about that. So it's like,
and then nature starts to claim it back.
It is too complex for me. I'll leave it up to the experts and do small things that I can do to help out.
All right, mate. Well, I've really, really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure everyone who's tuned in and made it to this point of the podcast has. I'll leave it for you with any final words and where you want to send people to follow you or find more information.
Yeah, just reach out to us on LinkedIn. That's kind of the one social media platform I actually communicate with people on. So if you want to know anything, if I can help out in any way, or whatever endeavors that your young entrepreneurs are doing, or the businesses that are out there, please let me know. I do a big portion of the speaking work that I do for different charities. I've said this much is for charities, and whether it's environmental organizations or kids charities or anything like that, just reach out, and if I can help, I definitely will.
All right, Mark Mathews, thank you so much for your time, mate.
No worries. Thanks for having us.